The perfect illusion. In the heart of Mississippi, where cotton grew taller than free men's dreams, the most celebrated chef in the South was a woman the world considered property. And on one frozen January night, she would use her greatest talent to serve a justice so cold it would shatter an empire. The Riverside Plantation was a kingdom of its own. 2,000 acres of richest soil, ruled by Colonel James Riverside with an iron fist in a velvet glove. But its true crown jewel wasn't the cotton. It was the kitchen. Politicians, merchants, and neighboring planters all schemed for an invitation to his table, desperate to taste the magic created by his cook. Her name was Celia. Arrived as a child, she was trained by Mama Ruth, an elder born in Africa who carried ancient secrets. Mama Ruth didn't just teach her to cook. She taught her the language of the earth, which herbs could heal, which roots could soothe, and which, if used a certain way, could do things better left unspoken. She also gave Celia a dangerous gift, the ability to read and write. Knowledge, Mama Ruth would say, is an inheritance no one can steal. By 1848, Celia was the engine of the plantation's prestige. She was a wife to Samuel, a blacksmith, and a mother to 3 beautiful children, Thomas, Mary, and little David. In a world designed to crush her spirit, she had carved out a fragile island of safety for her family. Her talent was their shield, or so she thought. Retention line. But that fragile shield was about to be shattered by a cruelty so casual it would birth a vengeance the South would never forget. The story continues just ahead. What is the price of a child's life? To a grieving mother, it's infinite. To a cruel man with absolute power, it was just an afternoon's amusement. The threat to Celia's world had a name: Addison Riverside. The colonel's son, home from his studies, was a younger, crueler version of his father. Bored and entitled, he saw the slave quarters as his personal playground. He enjoyed teaching lessons to the children about their place in the world through twisted, cruel games. Celia sensed the danger. She kept her young kitchen assistants close when he was near. But she never imagined his eyes would fall on her own children. The day of the colonel's important business lunch was Celia's masterpiece. The turtle soup, the glazed ham, the bourbon pudding, every dish was perfect. The guests were euphoric. Her reputation was sealed. But in the midst of her triumph, a cold dread set in. Her children, who always came to the kitchen by noon, were nowhere to be seen. Then the scream, smoke, the old barn was engulfed in flames, and the sounds, the muffled screams from inside, were ones she would recognize in her nightmares forever. They found them huddled together: Thomas, who had tried to protect his siblings, little Mary, baby David. The door to the barn had been locked from the outside. The official story? A tragic accident. Children playing with fire. But 3 days later, the truth came from a trembling kitchen girl. She had seen Addison. He'd been laughing, leading them into the barn, promising a new game. Retention line. In that moment, something in Celia broke, and something new, cold, and infinitely patient was born. What she did next would require every secret she'd ever learned. Grief can destroy you, or it can forge you into something unstoppable. Celia chose the latter. She was no longer just Celia. She chose a new name: Washington. A name of a man who fought for freedom. She would fight for hers. While the plantation pretended to move on, Celia Washington began her work. By day, she was the impeccable cook, more dedicated than ever. By night, she was a student of a darker craft. She remembered every lesson Mama Ruth had whispered under the moon. She ventured into the swamps, collecting mushrooms from rotting logs, vines from dead trees, roots that held ancient power. She wasn't just collecting poisons, she was studying them. She tested tiny, careful doses, learning their effects, their timing, their perfect disguises. Addison himself became her first unwitting test subject. His unexplained stomach pains, his sudden fatigue, His mysterious nausea, the doctors were baffled. One even suggested he avoid spiced foods. Celia almost smiled, if only he knew. Then the opportunity of a lifetime arrived. The colonel's daughter Pearl was to be married. A grand wedding banquet. An intimate affair for 17 of the county's most prominent families, the very people who upheld the system that had killed her children and protected her murderer. This would be her canvas, her final masterpiece. She planned each victim's fate with chilling precision. The colonel would get one poison. The cruel matriarch who broke up families would get another, designed to bring terrifying hallucinations. Addison? He would get a special cocktail designed to make him feel every second of his body failing him. She even planned for innocence. The few children present would get a sweet, sleepy porridge to carry them safely through the nightmare. Her justice was not blind. It was surgical. Retention line. The wedding day dawned clear and cold. The guests were arriving, eager for the feast of a lifetime. They had no idea they were walking into a trap meticulously set by the woman they thought they owned. On January 27, 1849, the finest families in Mississippi sat down to the last meal they would ever eat. And the artist of their fate moved silently in the kitchen, her apron pockets filled with secrets. The kitchen was a symphony of controlled chaos. Celia, the conductor, oversaw every detail. But only she touched the final seasonings. Only she unlocked the small cabinet holding her special ingredients. She watched the wedding ceremony from the window. The laughter, the silk dresses, the toasts to love and future, all of it was a grotesque parody in her eyes. These people celebrated their prosperity built on the bones of her children. When the time came, she personally served the children their special meal. They ate happily, their eyelids soon growing heavy, and were carried off to a deep, dreamless sleep. They would be spared. Then the feast began. Oysters with a hint of something peculiar. The famous turtle soup, praised by everyone. The guests ate with gusto, complimenting Colonel Riverside on his exquisite taste. He basked in the glory, never knowing its source was about to become his end. The main course was served. Celia had plated each dish herself, a specific cut of roasted pork for the colonel, a delicate sauce for his wife, the rarest meat, heavily seasoned, for Addison. Each bite carried a sentence she had passed. For nearly 2 hours, the banquet was a triumph. Then, Colonel Thompson, a man known for his brutality, clutched his stomach. His face went pale. Then his wife gasped, a burning in her throat. The elegant hall dissolved into chaos. The sounds of celebration were replaced by gagging, moans of agony, and screams of sheer terror. Bodies slumped over fine china, convulsed on the Persian rug, clawed at their own throats. Addison tried to stand, to command order, but his legs betrayed him. He looked across the room and his eyes locked with Celia's, standing calmly in the kitchen doorway. In that single horrifying moment, he understood everything. The terror in his eyes was the final ingredient in her recipe. Retention line. As the last guest drew their final breath, Celia didn't flee. She had one last thing to do, a message to leave that would echo through history. What happened next? You won't believe it. The next morning, they found 17 corpses in a scene of unimaginable horror. But the murderer had vanished into thin air, leaving behind only a name and a promise. The sheriff arrived to a silent house of death. Bodies were frozen in agonized poses. And on the kitchen table, a note written in a clean, careful hand. For Thomas, Mary, and David, justice has been served. Celia Washington. Panic exploded across the South. A $500 reward was posted for Celia, dead or alive. Planters fired their slave cooks. Dinner parties became paranoid affairs where hosts tasted the food first. The unshakable illusion of control had been shattered by one woman with knowledge and a cause. They searched everywhere, but Celia was gone. She had planned her escape with the same precision as her revenge. Using old slave trails and hidden swamps, she moved like a ghost. Some said she went north. Others whispered she was helped by abolitionists. Samuel, her husband, was questioned for days but knew nothing. When shown the note, he cried, not from sadness, but from a fierce, terrible pride. The Riverside plantation was cursed. The colonel, broken by the loss and the truth he helped bury, sold the land for pennies. The grand house was torn down, but the story refused to die. It spread through slave quarters as a legend, a story of a woman who fought back. In the big houses, it became a nightmare, a warning that the oppressed were watching and they would not forget. Retention line. So what happened to Celia Washington? Did she find the freedom she paid for in blood? The answer is more powerful than you think, and it changes everything. Celia Washington never was caught, but her true victory wasn't her escape. It was the terrifying, unforgettable echo of her act that still resonates today. Did she make it to freedom in Ohio? Canada? No one knows for sure. Sightings were reported for years, but none confirmed. Perhaps she did. Perhaps she didn't. It almost doesn't matter, because Celia Washington achieved something far greater than personal liberty. She became a symbol. In the slave quarters, her name was whispered with awe, proof that resistance was possible. In the mansions, it was spoken in fear, a reminder that injustice has a cost, and someone someday may come to collect it. She proved that knowledge is the ultimate weapon, that patience can be a sharper tool than rage. That even those written out of history can write their own story in the most permanent ink imaginable. Her story forces us to ask the hardest questions. Was it justice, or was it revenge? Where is the line? When a system is built on a fundamental evil, can its laws ever deliver true justice? Celia Washington answered that question not with a lawyer's argument, but with a chef's precision. She chose her own name. She chose her own justice. And in doing so, she carved her name into history forever. Justice is not always found in a courtroom. Sometimes it's served on a fine porcelain plate, seasoned with herbs from a Mississippi swamp, and delivered by a woman the world refused to see. If this story of courage and consequence moved you, then share it. Share it with someone who needs to remember that history is written by the voiceless as much as by the powerful. Subscribe now for more tales of those who defied the world and changed it forever. And tell me in the comments, do you believe Celia was a hero, a villain, or something else entirely? The conversation is what keeps these stories alive.